The bank teller looked at me, paused, and said, "Ma'am, your name isn't on this account." And for a second, I thought she had the wrong file, wrong person, wrong everything. But then she turned the screen toward me, and I saw it. 7 years of marriage, and not a single account with my name on it. Not the checking, not the savings, not even the account we used to pay our mortgage every month. And before I could even process it, I heard a voice behind me say, "I told him this would happen." And when I turned around, it was Ryan, my husband's younger brother, standing there like he'd been waiting for this moment. And suddenly I felt it. That quiet shift in the room where you realize you're the only one who doesn't know the truth. And everyone else has been living with it for years. So before I go any further, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always read them. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and that morning at the bank was the moment I realized my marriage wasn't just built on lies. It was never real to begin with. But to understand how I got to that counter, standing there like a stranger in my own life, you need to go back to where it all started. Back to the house in suburban Illinois, where everything looked perfect from the outside, where my husband Daniel knew exactly how to smile at the right moments, say the right things, and make everyone believe we had the kind of marriage people envied. Because, for years, I believed it too. I believed him when he said he preferred handling the finances. I believed him when he told me paperwork stressed me out and he was just protecting me from it. I believed him when he laughed it off every time I asked why my name wasn't on certain documents, saying, "It's just easier this way." And I told myself that trust meant not asking too many questions. That love meant letting go of control. But there were moments, small ones, the kind you ignore because they don't fit the story you want to believe. Like the time I tried to sign for a package and the system flagged my name as not matching the homeowner, or when a tax document arrived addressed only to Daniel and he quickly tucked it away before I could read it, or the way his parents would go quiet whenever finances came up. Like there was an unspoken rule I wasn't part of, and Ryan, he was always different, distant, watching. Like he knew something he didn't agree with but wasn't ready to say, and I used to think it was just his personality, that maybe he didn't like me. But now, standing in that bank with his words echoing in my head, I realized something else entirely. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate, planned, maintained, and worst of all, it was shared. Because the look on Ryan's face wasn't surprise. It was resignation, like he'd been waiting for the truth to surface on its own. And when I turned back to the screen and saw only Daniel's name where mine should have been, a question formed in my mind that I wasn't ready to answer yet. If I wasn't part of the life we built on paper, then what exactly was I to him? And why did it feel like his entire family already knew the answer, except me? I did not grow up thinking I would be the kind of woman who asked questions about paperwork or ownership or signatures. I grew up believing that if you loved someone, you trusted them. And that belief started long before I met Daniel. In a house where appearances mattered more than clarity, where my mother used to say, a good marriage is about peace, not control. And I carried that with me into everything. Even when small things did not make sense. Even when I felt that quiet discomfort I could never quite explain, because with Daniel, everything looked right from the outside. We met when I was 25 at a friend's 4th of July barbecue in Naperville. He was the kind of man people noticed immediately. Confident without being loud, attentive in a way that felt rare. He remembered details, the kind you mention once and forget, like how I took my coffee or the name of my childhood dog. And when he asked me out, it felt easy, natural, like stepping into something that had already been decided. His family welcomed me quickly, but not warmly, more like I had been approved rather than embraced. His mother would smile and say, "Daniel always chooses carefully," as if I were a decision, not a person. And I laughed it off at the time, because nothing about it felt openly hostile, just slightly off, like a room that looks perfect until you notice something is not quite aligned. And there were patterns. Small ones. Repeated so often they became normal. Every holiday dinner at their house followed the same structure, his father at the head of the table, Daniel to his right, his mother serving dishes in a precise order, and Ryan sitting slightly apart, quieter, observing more than participating. Conversations about money, investments, or property would start easily, then stop the moment I asked a question. Daniel would place his hand lightly on mine and say, "We will talk about that later." But later never came. When we bought our house 3 years into our marriage, I remember standing in the driveway holding the keys, feeling proud, accomplished. And when I joked about finally seeing my name on something official, Daniel laughed, kissed my forehead, and said, "It is all ours, that is what matters." And I accepted that because I wanted to believe that shared life meant shared ownership, even without seeing it on paper. There were other moments too. The kind you file away because they are too small to confront, like the time a delivery driver asked for the homeowner's signature and Daniel stepped in before I could respond. Or when a piece of certified mail arrived and he took it straight from the mailbox without letting me see the sender, or the way his mother once corrected a guest who referred to me as the homeowner, saying, "Emily helps Daniel with the house." And everyone laughed like it was harmless, like it was nothing. And I laughed too, because it felt easier than asking why that sentence bothered me. Ryan noticed those moments. I know he did, because sometimes I would catch him looking at me, not with judgment, but with something heavier, something like hesitation. Like he was deciding whether to say something and choosing not to. And I told myself it meant nothing, that families have their own dynamics, their own habits, their own ways of communicating that outsiders do not always understand. And I worked harder to fit into that space. To be the easy one, the agreeable one, the wife who did not complicate things. But looking back now, I can see the pattern clearly. It was never about me not understanding. It was about me not being allowed to know. And the moment everything began to shift was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost forgettable. A single envelope that arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, addressed only to Daniel, marked urgent. And for the first time in 7 years, he did not take it from my hands when I picked it up from the mailbox. He just stood there, watching me hold it. And in that silence, I felt it, that subtle, undeniable crack forming in the life I thought I had been living. He did not reach for the envelope, and that was the first time I realized something was wrong in a way I could not ignore, because Daniel always took control of anything official, anything with a logo or a return address, or the word urgent stamped across it. But that afternoon, he just stood there, watching me, and I remember saying, "Do you want me to open it?" And he smiled, too quickly, too casually, and said, "It is probably nothing." But he did not take it from me. So I opened it right there in the kitchen, rain tapping softly against the window, and inside was a letter from a law office in Chicago. Formal, precise, addressed to him by full legal name. And the first line I read was not even a full sentence, just a reference number and a case title, but beneath it were two names, his name and another woman's name, and the word that sat between them did not make sense in that moment. Marriage? I stared at it longer than I should have. Like, maybe if I looked hard enough it would rearrange itself into something less final, something less impossible. And I asked him, quietly, "Why is your name here with someone else?" And for the first time in 7 years, Daniel did not answer me right away. He walked to the counter, poured himself a glass of water, drank it slowly, and said, "It is old paperwork. It does not matter anymore." But the date at the top of the letter said it did matter. It was current, active, and when I turned the page, there it was again, a reference to an ongoing legal status. Not dissolved, not finalized, and my hands started to feel cold even though the kitchen was warm. I remember asking, "Are you still married to her?" And he said no too quickly, like he had practiced that answer, like it had been waiting, and then he added, "It is complicated," which was not an answer at all. And that was the moment something shifted inside me, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet recognition that I had been given a version of reality that was incomplete, and I needed to see the rest of it. So I did something I had never done before. I went to our office, opened his desk drawer, the one he always kept locked. Except it was not locked that day. And inside were folders, neatly labeled, organized, and I pulled one out at random, and inside was a document with a state seal at the top, a marriage certificate, dated 9 years ago, 2 years before we met. And there was no record of dissolution attached to it, no divorce decree, nothing that showed it had ever ended, and beneath that were financial statements, accounts I had never seen, accounts that explained why my name had never appeared anywhere, and Circe's, because legally, I was not supposed to exist in that space. And then my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number, just one line. You might want to ask him about the house on Maple Street. And I did not recognize the number, but I recognized the address because it was not ours. And when I walked back into the kitchen holding the papers, Daniel looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw it for the first time. Not fear, not guilt, but calculation. Like he was deciding which version of the truth I was allowed to hear next. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life did not just feel uncertain. It felt constructed, and I realized I was not standing in my home anymore. I was standing in the middle of something that had been carefully built without me, and I had just found the first piece that proved it. That night did not end with shouting or doors slamming. It ended with silence, the kind that settles into the walls and makes everything feel unfamiliar. Daniel did not deny what I found. He just kept repeating that it was complicated, that there were reasons I did not understand yet. And I remember standing there holding those papers, thinking that none of those reasons could possibly justify 7 years of lies, but I still tried. I wish I could say I walked away immediately, but I did not. I stayed in that kitchen and asked questions, real questions, and when he would not answer them, I followed him from room to room asking again, calmer each time, like if I lowered my voice enough. He would finally tell me the truth, but he never did. The next morning I called him 3 times before 10 o'clock, each call going to voicemail, so I sent a message. We need to talk. Please just explain this to me. And I watched the screen as the message delivered, then read. And still nothing came back. I sent another one at noon, then another at 3, each one shorter than the last, until the last message just said, I deserve to know. And even that felt like too much to ask. By the second day, I started reaching out to his family. I called his mother first. She let it ring out, then texted me 30 minutes later. This is not the right time, Emily. Like there would ever be a right time for something like this. I called his father. It went straight to voicemail, no response. And then I called Ryan, the only person who had ever looked at me like he knew something was wrong. He answered on the second ring. And for a moment I thought he would finally explain everything, but instead he said, I told him to tell you, and when I asked him what that meant, he just said, I cannot do this for him, and hung up, and that was it. 3 people, 3 chances for the truth, and all of them closed the door in a different way. So I tried something else. I wrote a letter, an actual letter, because it felt more real than a message on a screen. I sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours, writing it out, explaining how confused I was, how I was willing to listen, how I just needed honesty. I left it on his side of the bed that night, neatly folded, and when I came back the next evening, it was gone. But there was no reply, no note, no acknowledgement that it had ever existed, just an empty space where my words had been. And that was when it started to settle in. Not all at once, but slowly, like something sinking. I was not being ignored by accident. I was being shut out on purpose, and every attempt I made to reach him, to reach any of them, only made that clearer, until I stopped trying, not because I did not care, but because I finally understood that I was asking for something they had already decided not to give me, and for the first time since I opened that envelope, I stopped waiting for someone else to explain my life to me and started thinking about what I would do if no one ever did. The next morning, I did not call him again. I did not check my phone every 5 minutes. I did not sit at the kitchen table waiting for answers that had already been denied. Instead, I packed a small suitcase, just enough for a few days, and left the house without leaving a note, because for the first time I understood that explanations only matter when both people are willing to tell the truth. And I drove 2 hours to a small apartment I found online the night before. Nothing special. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, a narrow balcony that overlooked a parking lot, but it was mine. At least in a way that I could prove my name was on the lease. I signed it myself, and that detail, that simple line with my signature, meant more to me than anything I had shared with Daniel over 7 years. The first week was quiet, almost too quiet. No one called, no one came looking, and that silence told me everything I needed to know about how easily I had been removed from their world. So I started building something of my own. Slowly, without announcing it, I took on more hours at work, stayed late, said yes to projects I would have turned down before, not because I needed to prove anything to anyone, but because I needed to prove something to myself, that I could stand on my own without waiting for permission, without asking to be included. And over time, things shifted, not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. My work began to be recognized. Small things at first. A manager asking for my input, a client requesting me by name, and then one afternoon, about 3 months after I left, I was called into the office and handed a thin folder. Inside was a formal letter offering me a promotion, a new title, a salary increase, and when I read it, my eyes went straight to the top where my full name was printed clearly. Emily Carter. No conditions, no omissions, no one else controlling how it appeared, just me. And later that week, they gave me a new badge. White plastic, my name printed in bold, my title beneath it, and I remember standing there in the break room holding it, running my thumb over the letters like I needed to feel them to believe they were real. Because for so long, my name had existed in spaces where it did not truly belong, or worse, where it had been intentionally excluded, and now it was attached to something I had earned, something no one could take or redefine. And I did not tell anyone from Daniel's family about it. I did not send a message or post anything online. I just kept moving forward, building a life that did not require their acknowledgement to exist, until one morning, standing at that same bank counter from weeks earlier, holding my new employee badge in one hand and a set of documents in the other, I realized I was no longer there to ask questions. I was there to correct something, and when the teller looked up at me again, I did not feel like a stranger anymore. I felt like someone who finally knew exactly where she stood, and that was the moment Ryan walked in, and everything connected back to where it had all begun. Life did not return to what it was. It became something quieter, something clearer, the kind of life where I no longer waited for someone else to explain things to me or decide what I was allowed to see. And a week after that morning, at the bank, Ryan asked to meet. Not at the house, not around his family, but at a small coffee shop about 20 minutes away, a place with wooden tables and soft music where no one knew us. And when I walked in, he was already there, sitting by the window, looking like someone who had been carrying something for a long time. He did not waste time with small talk. He just placed a folder on the table between us and said, "I should have told you sooner." And inside were copies of everything. The original marriage certificate, the property records for the house on Maple Street, financial accounts tied to that address, and a letter from a lawyer confirming that Daniel had never finalized his divorce. Not legally, not on paper, which meant that everything built with me had been structured around that fact, carefully, intentionally, and when I looked up at Ryan, I did not feel anger toward him. Just a quiet understanding that he had been standing at the edge of this truth for years, unsure of when to step in, and I asked him why now, and he said, "Because you finally saw enough that it would not destroy you to know the rest." And that sentence stayed with me, because he was right. If I had learned all of this years ago, I might have tried to fix it, to stay, to make sense of something that was never meant to include me fully, but now, sitting there with my own documents in my bag, my own name, on my own accounts, it felt different. It felt like clarity instead of collapse. A few days later, I saw Daniel one last time, not at home, not in a place that belonged to him, but outside a law office downtown. He looked tired, older somehow, and he tried to explain again. Said there were reasons, obligations, things he thought he could manage without it affecting me, and I listened, not interrupting, not arguing, just letting him finish, and when he was done, I said, "You did not forget to tell me. You chose not to." And he did not deny that. He just looked at the ground, and in that moment, I realized something important. Closure does not come from the other person finally saying the right thing. It comes from you no longer needing them to. So I handed him the copies I had brought, the ones with my notes, my timeline, everything I had pieced together, not as an accusation, just as a record. And I told him, "This is where I stop being part of your story." And then I walked away. No scene, no raised voices. Just a clear line drawn where there had never been one before. And now, my life is not perfect. It is smaller in some ways, quieter, but it is mine in every way that matters. My name is on the things I build. My decisions are my own, and the peace I have now is not something that was given to me. It is something I chose. And if there is one thing I have learned, it is that trust is not about closing your eyes and hoping everything is real. It is about being willing to look closely, even when it is uncomfortable. And if you are listening to this, and something in your life does not quite add up, do not ignore that feeling. That quiet voice is not there to scare you. It is there to guide you. Protect yourself. Understand what you sign. Know where your name stands. Financially, emotionally, legally. Because love should never require you to disappear in order to keep it. And if you have been hurt, if you have been made to feel like you are asking for too much just by wanting the truth, you are not alone. There is strength in stepping back, in choosing yourself without anger, without revenge, just with clarity. And maybe that is where real healing begins. Not in fixing what broke, but in understanding why it broke and refusing to carry it forward. Thank you for staying with me through this, for listening, for holding space for a story that is not loud but is real. My name is Emily Carter. I am 32 years old. And the lesson I want to leave you with is this. Never let someone else define your place in a life that you are living. And if this story meant something to you, you can share your thoughts, your story, or simply where you are listening from, and what time it is there. Sometimes knowing we are not alone is the first step toward healing, and if you feel ready, there are more stories like this waiting for you. Stories about truth, about quiet strength, about finding your way back to yourself. You might see pieces of your own life in them, and maybe, just maybe, find something that helps you move forward too.